Amy Yuri, and this is going to be my presentation for Trends and Issues for Dr. Flom. The topic that I selected for this project was that of dark themes and mature subject matter or content in young adult literature. I selected this topic for a couple of different reasons. The first reason is that I am a middle school teacher and I teach English. As a middle school teacher, my primary goal is actually not to help kids pass standardized tests and things like that. Instead, my goal is to help my students develop a love of reading. That can be very difficult with middle schoolers because this is the age when they start to discover social media, they start to blossom in their own social lives, they start to really get into other hobbies and sports and interests, video games, things like that. And reading a lot of times takes aside to all of these other things that seem to be more fun and more entertaining that supply them with that quick gratification or that instant gratification. Another reason why I feel like this topic is very important and relative is because I do know that my students come from extremely different backgrounds from one another. They come with, some of them, quite a bit of baggage and experiences that are so very diverse from one another. Really, there are probably several students in their classes that have experienced similar things, but that doesn't ever get talked about. A lot of the things that our students are going through, they don't talk about, and they keep it bottled up inside. And as we know, when you bottle things up, especially emotionally, bad things can happen. Depression is very common with middle schoolers now, and I think that a lot of that has to do with there's not really an outlet or anything to provide these students with a sense of hope or relief or promise for the future. What does that have to do with dark themes in young adult literature? Well, a lot of these books that are being criticized by not only book reviewers, but parents and even teachers and librarians feature these issues that a lot of our students come to us with. I know that I have had students who have had to deal with the loss of a parent at a very young age. They have been witness to drug use and abuse. Some of them, their parents are imprisoned for one reason or another. Some of these children have been victims of abuse or even sexual assault or molestation. A lot of these students also have emotional issues. They have suffered some type of trauma in their life. They have depression, or they're even struggling with identity issues, eating disorders, just such a wide range of issues and concerns that are very deep and very mature and often overlooked by those who haven't experienced the same things themselves. As teachers, we really don't get that chance to get to know our students that well, but I think it's safe to say that most of us know that we do have students in our classrooms that deal with some of these things. Now, as I get into this, I'm not advocating for teachers to try to, diagnose students or basically do what would be called like bibliotherapy, giving books to children based on what they think that they need and then trying to have some type of a therapeutic, connection with that student. That's not our place at all as reading teachers or as teachers at all. Instead, I think our place is to, and this is just a personal opinion, and again, another reason why I chose this topic, I think that our place is to have a wide range of literature, from classics to poetry to sports books to graphic novels, just a huge range of topics and subject matter and genres available for our students. And then we have to make that very careful decision on, if a student should indeed read a book based on their maturity level, reading level, and whatnot. A lot of the books that I'm going to mention today are books that I do require parental consent before I allow students to check it out from my personal library in my classroom. I have actually never experienced a parent say no to any of those books once they find out what the actual content is. They've always said yes, and that they agree that their child can handle that subject matter or topics. Another issue with dealing with dark themes is whether or not reading about some of these things encourages some type of negative behavior or whatever. For example, if a student is reading about self-harm, will that then promote that self-harm is acceptable with that student or reader? The majority of the research that I found does not support that at all. And I have to say from personal experience that I agree. I've always been a fan of horror books, darker topics and more mature, content in books, even as young as like 9, 10 years old. I think I read my first Stephen King book when I was about 10. 10, 11, I was a fifth grader. And by no means at all am I a, depressed or sad person who's ever thought of, murder or crime or anything like that. I think having an interest in something beyond our own world is not necessarily a bad thing. So some children may be drawn to these books more out of an interest in broadening what they know about someone who is different from them, or they may just enjoy the mystery or the intrigue that some of these books do offer. On the other hand, some students may be drawn to these books because they can relate to it in some way, and it gives them that sense of hope, and it makes them feel a little bit better about some of the issues that they are struggling with in their personal lives. So for this project, actually read about 4 or 5 books, but I'm continually reading books in that fit into the realm of dark themes or more mature content. So I'm just going to share with you a few of them that I read, and I tried to pick a pretty wide variety of things. Probably the oldest of these books that I read would be Jay Asher's 13 Reasons Why. This is an amazing book, and I've recommended it to many, many of my students. It is incredibly well written and so unique in the writer's style. It is fantastic. So basically the main character, well, not even the main character really, she seems like the main character, but from the onset of the book we know that she is deceased, that she has made the choice to take her own life, and prior to doing this, she creates a series of cassette tapes, 13 of them to be exact, and deposits them in a box on someone's doorstep, and then takes her life. And basically the tapes take the real main character, Clay, through all of these situations which led her to the point where she felt like she needed to take her own life. It does deal with suicide, and it does deal with it deals with some other things too. There's the issue of a sexual assault in here. Is definitely mature content. However, depending upon the reader and their maturity level, this to me is a fantastic book. Another one that this one right here, as you can see, it already has a tag on it that says that it may contain mature situations or language, read with parental approval. This one is still on a bestseller list, even though it was published years and years ago. It has won many, many different awards. This is Speak. Speak is about a girl named Melinda who has chosen to be mute, self-selective mutism. She decides to no longer speak after a traumatic experience at a party. Unknown to all of her classmates, who just feel like she called the cops on a party just for who knows what reason, they despise her and bully her and mistreat her, but she's actually holding a very dark and deep secret, and that is that at this party she was sexually assaulted by a very popular and revered member of their school community. So this one is actually not nearly as mature as 13 Reasons Why, in my opinion. It is probably on about a 4th grade reading level, so a lot of students who do struggle with reading but need something that they can connect to or enjoy, or that want to, really get entwined in a story, this one is a good one for that purpose. Another one that deals with death is Shine by Lauren Miracle. This is, yeah, I still have the sticker on it from when I got it at Hastings. This one right here, every time you buy this book, a portion of the proceeds goes to the Matthew Shepard Foundation. That is because, and this is another one that, yes, parent permission is needed in order to check it out. So this one is about a girl named Kat who distances herself from a friend. They have a falling out, and then later she finds that he has been brutally murdered in what ends up being a hate crime. He was openly gay, so this does deal with gay gay teenagers. Poverty is involved. She finds out that some of her friends are involved in meth. So although it doesn't describe them doing the drugs, meth is mentioned in here, as well as there's a scene in the book that takes place in a gay bar where they're trying to find information about who may have killed her good friend. But as she sets out to investigate the crime and try to figure out who would do this to her good friend, who clearly didn't deserve it, as she gets more involved in it, she finds out that even her own brother is not quite who she thinks he is. It's an excellent book, but definitely more mature. Not necessarily a bad book for teenagers to read, however, in my opinion. Another book that I really, really loved, I've actually read this one several times and bought several copies, is Skinny by Donna Cooner. This is an absolutely fantastic book. I love the writing style of Donna Cooner in this book. Basically, this is about a girl named Ever who is severely overweight. She is, of course, the brunt of many, many jokes. She's called names. She's tripped. Some very humiliating and embarrassing things happen to her at school because of her weight. On top of all of that, she has this inner voice that she refers to as Skinny. This inner voice is absolutely terrorizing, constantly pointing out her flaws and how disgusting she is and ugly and worthless and how she might as well kill herself. Forever, though, she realizes that maybe she could do something else to silence this voice, Skinny, and actually make a change for herself. So she decides to undergo a weight loss surgery. Of course, as the pounds go off, part of her is growing more confident, but another part of her is still hanging on to that voice that she calls Skinny in her head. And so she realizes that just losing weight doesn't get rid of that negativity and that self-hate. It's a very touching book. At the end, I was a mess of tears. Most of my students who do read it, I've noticed, have the students who gravitate towards it, a lot of times you can tell do suffer from self-image issues. And again, as middle schoolers, that's that critical time period where you're building your self-image and your confidence just really kind of fluctuates and goes back and forth. And there's definitely hope and a positive message at the end of this book. Another book that deals with self-image, well, not really even self-image, but more like identity, would be George. This particular one was an uncorrected proof, but since then the actual book has come out. This is by Alex Gino. This book on the back says, be who you are. George is a young man who does not see himself as a young man at all. In fact, he has always identified as a girl. So this gets into some transgender issues. George is actually only a fourth grader, and when the part for Charlotte and Charlotte's Web comes available at his school, he tries out for the part and is told, of course, no, you can't be Charlotte because you're a boy. So he has to try to find a way to, come to terms with who he is and she is inside, and while simultaneously trying to convince his parents of who she really is, and get the part in the play. And it's a really sweet book. George is such a lovable character as well. Another book that my students have absolutely loved, and I did as well, is Backlash. And this has to do with cyberbullying, catfishing, and attempted suicide. So this deals with a lot of different issues. So basically, Laura meets this guy that she thinks is the man of her dreams online, and they start up an online relationship. When the online relationship ends in a very brutal and hateful and hurtful way, the other people at her school kind of jump on that, and some cyberbullying starts to occur. Laura already has some self-confidence issues and has had bouts of depression, and so she attempts suicide. Her former best friend Bree at first kind of feels like this is just another dramatic thing that Laura is trying to do to get attention. But then when she realizes who's actually behind the screen, who basically is what's called catfishing, where someone says that there's someone and they hook someone into a relationship online and then they're not at all seen to be. Bree finds out who's behind the catfishing of Laura that led her to attempt suicide, and it is truly a huge shock. And as the title implies, backlash, the backlash of that one action of pretending to be somebody else online that they really weren't, the impact of that one thing is massive and huge. Students are absolutely fascinated about this because it has that social media aspect, and it's something that they can relate to because they know people do these things, and some of them may even do it themselves or have experienced it. The last book that I want to talk about is Cut by Patricia McCormick. And this deals with self-harm and cutting. And it takes place in a treatment facility for teenagers. It's told in a couple of different perspectives. It involves letters, and the dialogue is it's as if you're sitting right there in the middle of their therapy sessions, and you, as someone who has not dealt with these issues, it just pulled me in and helped me better understand students who do self-harm. I have not noticed that I have any students that gravitate towards this because I think that they may be, wanting to self-harm, but rather the students that gravitate towards this are very sensitive souls that want to help others, and that draws them to this book. This is another one, though, that I do require parental permission for, because it does get into the reasons why these teenagers do have eating disorders or harm themselves. And some of those issues, of course, are very mature and pretty deep and difficult for some students who haven't experienced those things to better understand. The final reason why I chose this topic is because I am a writer myself, and although I have not published a novel yet, all of my writings, from my young adult books to my poetry projects, have been centered around darker topics. I have no idea why. I've always had an interest in writing about darker subject matter, but I always have. And as a middle school teacher, that the desire to explore some of those darker themes and give a voice, to some of these issues has only grown stronger over time. Occasionally I do have students read my work, and the feedback I get is that they love the characters because they see the characters' true souls and the pain and things that they go through, and it makes them more empathetic and more understanding. And I think in the end, that's what we need in this world. We need more empathy, more understanding, and more acceptance. Maybe the key to that is indeed through literature, even if that literature does seem darker than what we used to read when we were the same age. Anyway, this was just a glimpse of just a small sector of books that fit into the theme of darker topics and deeper issues. I hope that you enjoyed my presentation. If you're interested in other books that I would recommend that fit into this realm, just let me know, because I actually have a pretty huge collection of books that fit into this. And I would be glad to share which ones I recommend, which ones I don't, because there are some that I do not, and what my experience has been teaching with some of these books. Thank you.